I'm Natalie and I'm your host, and welcome back to another great episode. Have you ever heard these words? Everything looks normal for your age. Those words changed the course of Dr. Jeffrey Gladden's life and his medical career. After decades as an interventional cardiologist, he hit his own health wall and refused to accept decline as inevitable. In this episode, we talk about why most medicine still treats sickness instead of health, how insulin and nervous system stress quietly drive aging, and why the same diet may help one person and harm another. If you're done settling for fine, this conversation opens a much bigger door. This episode is brought to you by Young Goose, by Quantum Upgrade, and by MitoPure Gummies, all with special offers just for you, the listeners. Make sure to check out the show notes below for details and enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. It is a complete honor to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's get people oriented around who you are and where you come from and all the things. Mm-hmm. And, you spent over 25 years as an interventional cardiologist.
Yep.
We were just talking about this a minute ago. And like other people in your field, you woke up one morning, it seems, and I'm going to invite you to share with us how this happened. At some point, you woke up one morning, or maybe we're standing in the OR with somebody's heart in your hands thinking there's a better way, there's a better way to do this. Maybe people don't have to get to this stage before somebody intervenes as an interventional cardiologist. So.
Okay. Yeah, we can get into that story. I think, I loved being an interventional cardiologist, right? I did a lot of things in that space here in Dallas, Texas, North Texas, Southeast Oklahoma. It turned out that I was kind of entrepreneurial as well, right? I put myself through college with my summer painting business and some things like that. And so anyway, when I got into medicine, that kind of circled back in. So I ended up building my own heart group. I co-founded a heart hospital here. I was involved with medical device companies. I was building cath labs. I was, involved with lots of different things. And I really enjoyed it. However, I was always struck by a line in the cath lab when we would go in and put a stent in or open up an artery. And the crew in the lab would always say, oh, it's like a new artery, right? Because when you look on the angiogram, you would see this, perfect silhouette of contrast going through an artery. It's like, oh, it's a new artery. And yet I was always so skeptical of that comment because it's like, no, it's not a new artery. It's an artery with a stent in it. And because we were using intracoronary ultrasound to actually look inside the arteries, which most cardiologists didn't do, still don't do, we could actually see they were full of plaque. The arteries were full of plaque. So there was nothing remotely close to this was a new artery, right? Yeah. This was not a new artery. So I had a level of skepticism about what we were doing even then, even though, it was interesting work and it was good work and we felt like we were helping people. And then when some genetics testing came along, right after, 1999, 2000, somewhere in there, I jumped on the bandwagon of that because all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, let's see what your predisposition is for heart disease. Maybe we can make different decisions based on what we see here. And in actual fact, we could. And so we found that if people would implement what we found based on some of the genetic insights we had, and even whether they would benefit from a statin or they wouldn't benefit from a statin or these kinds of things, it was like, oh, well, this is interesting. And we were getting better outcomes for people with that. But what really flipped the switch for me was not an insight standing in the cath lab per se, but it was my own health journey. So what happened to me in my 50s was that all of a sudden, I found myself putting on weight, being exhausted all the time. Even when I got a couple of good nights sleep, I would, I was doing a lot of things. So there was stress in my life. And I would find that if I got overly stressed, I would become anxious and then I would go over a cliff of depression. And I had struggled with some depression earlier in my life as well, going through divorce and things like that. I think I spent most of my 20s actually being somewhat depressed. And so I'm concerned about all these things. And my father died with dementia and I'm developing brain fog. So I've got brain fog, I've got exhaustion, I'm losing muscle mass, I'm putting on fat. Right. And
not looking
when
good.
I'm anxious, I'm getting depressed. Right. And it's like, okay, there's a problem here. Now, the interesting thing is my grandmother, my mother's mother, I was very close with my mom's parents. had always told me as a kid and teenager and whatever else, Jeff, it's hell to get old. You don't ever want to get old. Jeff, it's hell to get old. You don't ever want to get old. And initially it was like, oh yeah, grandma, blah, 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 blah. Now here I am sort of like feeling this stuff. So I go in and I'm tested by one of my colleagues. And what I'm told is, all your tests come back looking normal for your age. You're just getting older. Why don't you take an antidepressant? And I think it was that moment in time that was really one of the most existential moments in my life. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm looking right down the barrel of this aging process, and it's all going to be downhill from here, right? And it's like, really, I've hit the zenith of my life. I'm 52 or whatever it was. I was like, this is it. This is the peak. It doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make peace with that, of course. So I've always been very athletic. I grew up playing soccer, basketball, running. I do a lot of athletics to this very day, snowboarding, mountain biking, all that kind of stuff. But point is, I couldn't believe it was all going to be downhill and that I wasn't going to be able to keep up with my kids anymore, right? Which is also a big deal. And so I basically, at that point, threw myself into the functional integrative age management medicine space. And it took me 2.5 years. And I had some help, of course, but I figured everything out, right? Yeah. Subclinical hypothyroidism. The blood work looks fine, but my reflexes were very slow. Resting metabolic rate was low. Genetically, I don't convert inactive T4 to active T3 in my brain. I'm homozygous at a SNP, a DIO2 SNP that decreases my ability to do that.
That'll bum you out.
Right. So if you just given me Synthroid, typical T4, it wouldn't have done that much for me. No. But I got on the right combination of T3 and T4, and all of a sudden it's like, inside of a week, the lights came back on. It's like, oh my gosh, I can bounce out of bed again. Then I was hormonally depleted, right? 20 years ago, that was a newer thing than it is today, but testosterone was down, DHEA was down, things like that. Got some of that repleted, lost 20 pounds of fat, put on 10 pounds of muscle. And then the anxiety, depression, and brain fog are all related to the fact that I don't have Alzheimer's genes, even though my father died with dementia, but I don't make certain neurotransmitters efficiently. So once I figured out the methylation cycle, and it was beyond the methylation cycle, some other things that factor in there, I got on the right set of supplements, and I also learned how to meditate, but I could come under lots of stress and not get depressed. And all of a sudden I'm like, gosh, I feel great again. I've been practicing sick care, not health care. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to have sick care conversations anymore. I want to actually help people that are going through what I'm going through to optimize their life and get back what they think they've lost irrevocably and actually get that back for them. So I left in 2012, and I kind of base jumped out of, a very successful practice into a world where I had no idea how to make a living. And, simultaneously was putting a couple girls through school and then went through a divorce and, everything else. It was like, it was heavy lifting, right? Lots of things going on. But the point is that, when I started to feel really, really good again, I started to ask the question, gosh, I wonder how good I can be, right? How fit, how strong, how mentally sharp, how many years and decades can we carry it forward? And that was really the initial question that kind of drove me forward, because in the process of reclaiming my health, what I learned is that it's the questions we ask that we get the answers to. If we're not asking the right questions, we're not getting the right answers, right? Yeah. You and I were talking about a couple of things about diet prior to just jumping on the podcast here, and we can circle back to that. The problem is people are asking the wrong questions, and I'll show you how that works. But anyway, it's really, really interesting to go through that journey. And so really initially it was concierge cardiology, then health optimization, then it was, really what's grown into Gladden longevity, which is really focused on this concept of when we're 100, we want to have a 30-year-old body. Or pick whatever age you want, 27, 26.
Even 40 would work.
40, yeah, 40-year-old body, great. People pick 40. I just finished a call with a guy out of Atlanta that wants to be 52. So that's great too, whatever you want. But develop a 300/3,000-year-old mind, right? All the insight, equanimity, wisdom, tranquility, transcendence, and being able to resonate in a very powerful, strong, vibration of creativity and from a loving place, creating joy. And so when we're able to do that, it's like, gosh, all of a sudden longevity is like the most exciting prospect on the planet. It's not about living longer, just that. It's not about more golf or more grandkids. It's about, gosh, we get to actually step into a life that nobody's been able to live before, right? Youthful body, all this wisdom, and then bring that forward. So that's kind of how it's evolved.
That is the most appealing articulation of living a very long life that I've heard from ever from anybody, because everybody talks about, I want to live to 150 or 180 or 200, exactly. Or I've had a guy on the podcast who said, I'm never going to die. Like dying is unnatural, he tells me.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, it sounds exhausting. Like this just sounds exhausting.
Right.
But this idea of a youthful body with a 3,000-year-old mind, both of which are founded on principles of resilience that, right, that we need. With that resilience is how we now can ebb and flow. And I'm still not convinced that 200 years is a good runway, but to hang on to that, to have that concept for as long as we're on this earth for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It seems like a much more mature approach than I don't want to die.
Right. Yeah, I'm not an immortalist, I will say that. And if I get hit by a bus on the way home this afternoon, I'm actually fine with that too, right? It's been an amazing journey, right? I don't really have a fear of death. I think I'm just on to the next adventure, really. So it's not about that for me. It's really about how do we actually step into a higher level of what it is to be human, right? Create better relationships, all these sorts of things. To me, that's exciting and fun. So I think about that. And I think it's such an abstraction to think about, what does it mean to be 150 or 200, right? Every picture I ever saw of somebody 120 or 110, it's like, geez, I don't know. That's not really what I'm going for, right? So there's not a lot of appeal to that. So I think I like the target that we have. And it helps us to really reference things and stay on track also. Because I'll tell you this, when I wake up every morning, I wake up 27. I was born in 1954 in February of 54, right? So, but I wake up 27 every day. And the reason I do that is because if we say, well, I'm good for my age, I'm better than most people my age, we're already acquiescing to aging, right? So it's like, no, pick the age you want to be and then reference that. And if I don't feel that age, it's like, well, what do I need to do to get back there? And that drives so much of asking the right questions. What do I need to do? What do I, blah, 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 blah. And then you get back to where you go.
Hey folks, I just wanted to throw a little message in here for those of you who are sending me all these incredible questions on social media or through YouTube or even on Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast. I wish I could get back to you, each one of you personally, but unfortunately I can't. And because I cannot, I created, about a couple of years ago now, I created a membership community where I get to hang out with people just like you. I do live weekly Q&As, almost weekly anyway. We also do have podcast guests come in to answer everybody's questions and do presentations. You get to interact live with those podcast guests. We will sometimes do challenges with some of the partners. Like in 2026, we have a mitochondrial enhancement challenge coming up where we're going to be testing mitochondrial function. We're going to be testing people's deuterium levels. If you haven't heard about deuterium, we've got podcasts coming down the pipes on that. And then people will be invited to follow a personalized protocol and then retest their mitochondria on the other side. We offer that in the membership community, and we do it at incredible discounts that you just can't find anywhere else. So if you're interested in hanging out with me and other like-minded people, which actually happen to include some pretty awesome practitioners and even some previous podcast guests who've come and joined the community, then I invite you to check it out on my website, natniddam.com/the-longevity-community, or just go to natniddam.com and look for the longevity community tab at the top of the page. Click on that and see if this is right for you. I would love to see you there. and we could make 2026 our best year ever together. So once again, that's natniddam.com. Just look for the longevity community tab at the top of the page. Now let's get back to the show. The piece of the question that a lot of people leave out, and we'll talk about some of the consequences of this, is for me. Because it is about the individual, right?
That's
so
right.
like you said to me, well,
right.
if you want to be 40, because maybe that's the time in my life when I felt the most amazing. Like in my 30s, I was a hot mess. In my 20s, I was like, well, don't even talk to me about it. But when I hit 40, man, I was crushing it. So, so that's where, and that's exactly like your patient who said, I want to be 52, because that's probably in his mind when he finally got it together and felt his best.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so, we often talk about physicians personalizing medicine or personalizing this, that, and the other thing. But are people really getting their heads around, how do I personalize everything for me, myself? How do I curate my own journey? And you talk about longevity mindset. And I think this is what you were alluding to just now, this longevity mindset and maybe you want to talk about it and get into it a little bit more, that is rooted in wisdom and equanimity. Equanimity is not a word we hear very often, but it inherently is probably the missing ingredient in the world at this very second.
Yeah, there's several missing ingredients, and I think equanimity is certainly one of them. Yeah, for sure. Where would you like me to start? Let's
just describe what this longevity mindset is, right? Because maybe it's a place of wanting less, but doing more, or whatever, however
I'll tee it up for you by giving you the construct that we've created. So one of the handicaps I think that we have, and I will just echo, it is individual. So just as I'm saying this, understand it's individual. But one of the problems that we have with the aging process is that we perceive it to be linear when it's actually exponential. Every year it's another birthday. I don't feel that much different. It's a linear process. And yet we know people age a lot more between 70 and 80 and 80 and 90 than 20 and 30, right? So, but if we ask ourselves, what are we going to be like in 20 years, right? If you and I do that, what are we going to be like in 20 years? It's virtually impossible to imagine we're going to be any different than we are today. Right?
Now, the human brain doesn't do that.
It doesn't. Right? It can't.
It doesn't go there.
It doesn't go there, right? So we're basically in an exponential game that we relate to from a linear perspective that we can't really feel, right? That puts us at a big disadvantage, right? And so understanding that it's an exponential game, and then understanding that many of the solutions that are offered in the quote unquote longevity space, it's all about diet. It's all about exercise. It's all about VO2. It's all about this. It's all about that. It's all about peptides. It's all about stem cells. Ultimately, all those things are great in the right place for the right person at the right time. But they're actually linear approaches to an exponential problem. They don't actually get at the real root cause. So in our world, what we did was to think about, how do you actually develop an exponential response to an exponential problem? What's the exponential strategy going to be? And so for us, there's really 5 circles, 5 areas that need to be addressed. The first one is life energy. The second one is longevity itself. And these are the actual hallmarks of aging, the biological processes that drive aging, right? Which are not typically addressed directly, but there are things like senescent cell formation, immunosenescence, shortened telomeres, decreased autophagy, reduced proteostasis, mitochondrial dysfunction, inflammation, oxidative stress, these things. So going at those becomes important. Then all the health things, right? Every organ system and all the subsystems. And then performance. So when I'm 100, I want to be fast, agile, strong, quick, balanced, great cardiovascular capacity, reserve capacity, anything I want to do, flexibility. So I can do that now. I can do anything I want to do, right? But I have to train for that. When you're 18, you lift some weights and go for a run. As you go through the decades, it takes different training, right? You've got to train. And one of the biggest insights about training is it's not about your muscles, it's about your nervous system. Yeah. You're actually training your nervous system. The muscles come along for the ride, right? How you move, how quick you are, et cetera. So that's the 4th circle. Then the 5th circle is really understanding the environments we reside in. We all live at home, work, business travel, vacation. And when you optimize those, and what I mean by optimize is make it as easy as possible to do what you want to get done keep the toxins out, whether it's, mold or, chemicals or whatever else, or toxic relationships for that matter. Or it's also wear your sneakers. What's in the refrigerator, what's in the freezer at 8 o'clock at night when I know I'm going to eat whatever's there, no matter, how disciplined.
No matter exactly.
Right. Right. So it's about architecting those spaces to support the mission, if you will. So when you put all that together, then you can actually start to create an understanding of what the levers are that reside on each of those circles, how to test for those, and then how to basically take action on them. And that becomes an exponential response with the feedback loops of follow-up testing and wearables and things. So that's how we think about that. Now, back to the mindset of aging. I think, people can get into longevity for many different reasons. They don't want to die. They don't believe they should die. They're afraid of dying. They've got a lot to live for. They want to do more, they want to sell this company and start 4 more. They've got a lot of grandkids. They want to have great grandkids. There's many different reasons. But at the end of the day, I think because longevity represents this opportunity for us to be expansive in terms of our psychospiritual development, the life energy circle is really focused on that. And it starts off with a growth mindset. So we've all heard that term, but what does it mean actually, right? So for me, the way I've defined it for myself is, are you married to your answers or are you married to your questions?
Love that.
Right?
Love that.
Because,
too many people married to their answers, for sure.
Right? They get married to their answers. We were talking about that before the show started. And so the thing for me is that even if you have strong beliefs, all of your growth is going to come from the questions that you're asking, not the answers that you have. And I think that's so critical to understand. And so in our world, we have thousands of answers in this practice, literally thousands, right? And we're happy to apply them in the right situation, but we're not married to any one of them. We're only married to 5 questions. How good can you be? How do you make 100 to new 30? How do you live well beyond 120? How do you live young for a lifetime? And how do you develop a 300-year-old mind? Right. So every day we wake up asking the questions. So it's like, there's something new, interesting, good, new insight, right? So we're learning at a massively accelerated pace here. The other thing about growth mindset is, are you a binary thinker or are you a quantum thinker? Right. When you look around the world, there's so much binary thought, right? We're right, you're wrong. We fought about it for 2,000 years. Let's do it for another 1,000 years. Somebody should shoot a nuke because, I mean, it's just total BS, right? So humans are not very smart. We have intellectual capability, but we don't have much wisdom, right? And so moving from binary thinking into quantum thinking, like a quantum computer, is 0 to 1, right? And when you flip a coin, if it's spinning in the air, that's like a qubit. It's everything at once. It's only when it lands in your palm
that it becomes.
That's right. And so when you have the ability to look at something rather than a binary, it's got to be this or that, but it's a field of all possibilities. How do we get the best solution at this time for the people involved in this situation? Now it opens up the creativity. Now you're asking the right questions about how do you actually do that, right? Now you can actually move the planet, yourself, the planet, your community, your family, whatever else forward. So I think that growth mindset, those elements of it become really, really critical. And I could walk you all around the circle, but that's a piece of it.
The death of curiosity is the death of humanity. And I think that even if we go back to even allopathic medicine, I think its biggest failing is that in training doctors when they're young, I've always kind of believed that they crush the curiosity out of them. Like they discourage it, they beat it out of them, they exhaust them until they can't ask another question. You know what I mean? And it's because people like to put down allopathic medicine, and I don't think anybody's out to. Most 99% of doctors are out to do good. It's just the toolkit that they were left with by the end of their training was lacking in this one very. Well, 2 critical ingredients, which is humility and curiosity.
I agree with you completely. The way I characterize is we were all brainwashed, right? Yeah. We all went through a brainwashing school. And at the end of the school, what we were led to believe was that you now hold all the answers. There's no other discipline that holds a candle to the knowledge that you have. Everything else is really not of much value. And you are now the holders of of health, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and that's how we were brainwashed, right? And so you come out after your point of 4 years and sleepless nights and thousands of hours of work, and you are now in that system.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I realized the failings of that system that I was able to leave it. I was always curious, like, oh, couldn't we do this better? How about if we did that? I even remember in medical school wondering, geez, I wonder if we could do labs and see if we could optimize a person, not just make them better, right? But the point is, we all of us are brainwashed, and then what we do is we get married to those answers. So right,
so
and then that's the hell of everybody. I don't care if you're a chiropractor, a naturopath, an MD, whoever you are, a psychologist for that matter. If you're married to your answers, it's not really that helpful, right? So,
and I think it's the reason why we're seeing powerful healers come out of all of those disciplines.
That's right.
Right? Because, and I think what I think is really exciting is, and I've interviewed some really powerful healers who aren't medical doctors, but who are healing people 100%. In ways that are 100%. So incredibly powerful. 100%. So helping people to kind of break through that paradigm, but also, the other thing with the amplification of social media and whatnot, everybody becomes an expert, helping people to really cut through the chafe. And I think it's it's that thing that you said about people who take, and I don't remember how you said it. You said it way better than I'm about to. But you just said it. You said when you're married to your answer, which means they've taken their flag and they've staked it in the ground. And this is the only way.
That's right.
Because they needed to write a book and they needed to pitch an idea and the publisher needed that idea constructed in a certain way. I'm like, so now what do you do when you find out that wasn't right? Or that there's something else, or that that's not the whole truth.
That's right.
And so, I mean, there was not even a question there. It's just like
no, but it's a good comment because I think if you're listening to this and you're wondering, the field is so full of many voices, right? And who do you quote unquote believe? I think the person you can believe the most is the person that's actually asking the questions that isn't married to the answers, right? And so. One of the things that we do in our practice here in the clinic here is, even though we literally have thousands of answers, the first thing we want to do when we're working with somebody is actually deconstruct their situation and understand them incredibly deeply. Genetics testing, biometric testing. I mean, you name it. Like, we're literally sending things around the world to get the results that we need, so that we deeply understand this individual. And then the psychospiritual piece of it, going through conversations with them about that. Why do they want to do this? What's important to them? Personality profiles, many, many layers of decoding and deconstructing the individual. It's like, oh, okay, so now we can actually start to make recommendations, right? A classic example is food. Food is, everybody needs to be a carnivore. Everybody needs to be a vegan. Everybody needs to, eat this. Eggs are good. Eggs are bad, blah, 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 blah. So the problem with every diet, the way I see it, is that it always starts with the food, right? Kale is good, kale is bad, right? It turns out that we think diets are actually very, very personalized. And so you really have to start with the individual. How are they built? Genetically, what do they do? How do they process carbs genetically, right? What's their gut biome? What's their digestive tract? What's their immune system doing, right? You get all that stuff together, whether they like, what actually tastes good to them. You get all that together, and then you can actually put together a diet that works for them. But we pull from all kinds of stuff. For one person, it feels great. For another person, it's not. But you have to figure out who fits who, right? So
I think also one of the most, when I was practicing as a nutritionist, one of the most powerful questions I felt I needed to get clarity on from someone, and it comes very fast, is, are you a person who eats to live or lives to eat? Because that is going to really inform how you help that person to adopt the diet that's really going to nourish them, right? Because that person who lives to eat, man, it better taste good. It's not going to happen.
And it better be around pretty often, right?
Yeah. And the eat to live person is like, they can eat the same 4 foods every day for eternity. They don't care, right?
Right.
And so they're going to build. It's just it's another set of challenges and constructs that they need to deal with. But let's go back to the personalization of diet, because I do think that's really fascinating. And one of the conversations we had before we turned on the mics was and I don't want to name names or anything, but even and we'll talk about cardiology because that's your roots. In the world of cardiology, we have we have cardiologists who believe that a carnivore, high-fat lifestyle is the path, and any carb is really going to destroy your arteries and create that situation you described with the plaque. And versus we have leaders in the field who believe that plant-based diet is the only way to go, that those animal fats are just going to clog you up and kill you. And I think that before we get into the conflict, which is the sad part, I think that both sides help people. Both sides have success stories.
Both sides help some people.
Correct. Exactly. They help some people. And of course, everybody who talks about the people they help, they don't really talk about the litter of people in the background that didn't get help.
Right.
So,
no, that's exactly right.
I'd love to invite you to kind of weigh in on this whole, and it repeats in all different areas, right?
That's right.
Seed oils, are seed oils really the product of Satan put on this earth to destroy our cells, or is there some nuance that we need to pull out of there?
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, again, I think it really comes down to the fact that, one man's food is another man's poison, so to speak, right? And so it's important to understand who you are, how you're built, what your digestive system's doing, what your immune system's doing, what your gut biome's doing. And also what we have found empirically is that people's guts do better when they're exposed to a variety of foods. So if people were to eat the same foods, so most people eat about 14 or 16 foods a day, or that's our core food,
they just cycle through. Yeah,
exactly. So what we've found is that when people only eat certain foods, their immune system starts to react to those foods. And so that can set up inflammation and other problems. So we like people to have variety in their foods, right? Expand it to 40 foods, right? And so each time you go into the store, buy something a little different. Well, we got beets last time. Let's get turnips this time. Let's get, just switch it up.
Yeah.
So we find that to be helpful. We also find that people really don't understand the whole carbohydrate scenario. And one of the things that we do is we measure how many copies of the amylase gene they have, which is basically an idea of how so this is a redundant gene, just for the audience. This is a redundant gene. You have many copies. You can have 1 copy or 20 copies of this amylase gene. And if you have more copies, you basically secrete in your saliva more amylase, which helps you start to break down carbs. And it turns out that people that can break down carbs more efficiently can carry more body weight and not become diabetic. They can, tolerate more carbs, if you will. So knowing that is helpful. One of the things that we do for everyone is a 2-hour glucose tolerance test with an insulin curve, because it is stunning to see how many people have insulin resistance, even though they have a normal hemoglobin A1C of 5.3, they have a normal fasting blood sugar of 90 or 89. And yet when you challenge them by giving them 75 grams of glucose, oh my gosh, there are a lot of genetic factors, right, that decrease somebody's incretin levels to where they don't get the signal that sugar just hit the system, and they could go from 90 to 180 in the first hour, right?
Yeah.
And their insulin may lag way behind, but their insulin may come out at the end and crush it. Now they have a blood sugar of 49 at the end of 2 hours, right? So there's that process. And then there are people where they control the sugar perfectly, but they're taking way more insulin than they should to do it, right? If you have an insulin level of 3 at rest or 2, it should go up maybe 4 to 5 times. So call it 15. We just had a guy in here from Virginia, 40-year-old guy, healthy guy, had a resting insulin of 10. It was up over 130 at 1 hour.
Wow.
Right?
That's intense.
So, exactly. And nobody would have picked that up.
Did he crash on the other side?
No, he didn't crash. No,
really?
He didn't crash. No, his insulin was still over 100 at 2 hours, and he just controlled his blood sugar normally, right?
And so is that a good thing for him?
It's good to control your blood sugar. It's terrible to have high insulin.
To need to have those insulin levels so high. Yeah.
Correct. Because the insulin drives aging, just like IGF-1 drives aging, right? So it basically increases senescent cell formation. It stiffens arteries. It does all kinds of things. And sugar itself will destroy the glycocalyx, which lines the arteries, which keeps them healthy. And so unless you're deconstructing the situation, unless you're looking behind the curtain, you really don't know. And this is one of the problems with most practitioners. They really don't know what they're prescribing. they're prescribing into a double-blind placebo-controlled trial where more people did better on this particular diet. Well, yeah, okay, but how many people were excluded from that trial, right?
Yeah.
And then are you going to really generalize that back to a population that wasn't really even represented in that trial?
Yeah.
And now, you see what I'm saying? So we have all
and who
of
are
this
the outliers?
and who are the outliers? We have all this skewed data. So what we believe is that everybody is an N of one. Everybody is their own system. And yes, there's similarities, but even if you know what mom and dad were, you still don't know yourself. Because the genetic profiles get mixed up. I mean, it's like a lottery, right? I mean, all the balls are spinning and you don't know how they're going to come out. So just because somebody had Alzheimer's doesn't mean you have any Alzheimer's genes, or just because they didn't doesn't mean you don't. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, and I think the overlay there, no matter what your genetics are, because, and this is why we talk about genetic predispositions, is what's your environment right now, which is going to impact how those genes 100%. Express, and the microbiome has been impacted by the environment, has been impacted by your life, by your diet, and that too. So your genetics and this is where I think the genetics card gets overplayed by so many people, is, it's great to know what that blueprint is, but unless you have real clarity on how those switches are set right now,
100%.
They mean nothing.
That's right. Well, they still mean something, but they are, because to your point, genes are a set of tendencies or proclivities, right? They're biases. And if you put them in the wrong environment, they'll cause certain problems. To your point, the environmental impact is can be much greater than the genetic impact. And that's, I think, the point you're making.
Yeah.
But even so, when you're looking at the environment, you kind of want to know what genes are most susceptible to that and what genes are most resilient related to that, right? So you get the whole picture, and then you can bring somebody back into balance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, environment could even be your diet. To your point on the amylase gene, if somebody has 20 copies of the amylase gene, they may have I must have half a copy, because if I eat rice, I become diabetic instantly. I must have missed the amylase stop.
There are more issues than that too. It could be that you're not getting the signal that it's coming in, right? The TCNF7 and some of the other genes that we look at. So, I mean, it's all discoverable, right? It's all discoverable. Yeah.
Do you have an example of where improving environment over labs kind of really made an impact on a single person, or created the biggest downstream? Like, do you have an example in your, I'm sure you've got a million examples in your head, but where tweaking the environment was the thing that really moved the needle for someone?
I think the biggest environment to tweak, there are several really heavy hitters out there, right? Mold can be a very heavy hitter. Lyme can be a very heavy hitter. Some people really don't detox hydrocarbons very well. Genetically, they don't. And that can be a super heavy hitter for them. But I really think the environment that matters the most is the internal environment, the psychospiritual environment. Yeah. I think so many people spend so much time stressed. There was an interesting study showing recently that people that are able to get into a deep meditative state, like a theta state, if you're familiar with the EEG, right? There's delta waves, which are sleep. That's like the slowest wave. Then there's theta, which is pre-sleep, hypnagogic state, if you're being hypnotized. It turns out young children between about 0 and 5 spend most of their life in theta. Interesting. Then you have alpha, which is normal meditation. Then you have beta, which is this conversation. Then you have gamma, which is a flow state, a higher frequency, right? But it turns out that if people can get into a theta state, and then they have a stem cell, peptide, bioregulator, combination of things on a rejuvenation procedure, they actually do much, much better than if they come into that stressed.
That makes so much sense, though. You've quieted the landscape, right? You've calmed everything down.
Your body can't heal when it's in fight or flight.
Yeah.
And so I think that landscape is the most important. There was an interesting study I'd done on Buddhist monks who were meditating, and about 10 or 15 minutes into going into a theta state, a deep meditative state, they were releasing their own stem cells to come out and heal themselves, right? So I think the biggest environmental challenge we have is actually regulating our own internal environment. And then, yes, all of the other things we talked about, right? And we live in a toxic environment. So, air filtration, water filtration, whatever you have to do to try to combat it. We can treat long haul everything. We've done all that. But the point is, the piece you can control is this, how stressed am I all the time, right?
Yeah.
Is your mind running all the time? Can you turn it off?
So what are your thoughts on all these vagal nerve stimulating devices that are out there right now? I feel like maybe they're just a bit of a trying to go at a big problem with one thing, but what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, so I think the vagal nerve stimulators can be helpful. What they're doing is they're stimulating this nerve that carries the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system tone, and it tends to amplify this healing, slow down the system parasympathetic signaling, right? So I think that's helpful. There are many, it also increases HRV, heart rate variability, right? When you have more parasympathetic tone. So I think when you're meeting people, it's another tool in the toolbox. However, it's not the actual answer, because really the actual answer is how you're perceiving life, right? I've gotten into this thing recently where I've come to understand that we spend a lot of time efforting, right? It's like we're going to try to make things happen. We need to get this done. There's things to
work at this. Yeah,
we got to work at this. I got to try this. I got to do it. And when we're working out, I got to push harder. I got to, whatever it is, right? So there's this kind of go mentality. What I've discovered is that I can flip the entire script by going into a situation, even this podcast, for example. Rather than coming in from an efforting perspective, I can come in from, I'm here to receive. I'm actually here to receive. And if I say I'm here to receive, then all of a sudden my whole system calms down. It's like, oh, let me be aware of what it is I'm receiving. All of a sudden it makes me incredibly present. It's like, oh my gosh, what a beautiful day. What a beautiful conversation. I'm so glad to be here. What a beautiful planet we live on, right? And so now you're looking at life through this very sort of transcendent space of, this is what a gift. What a gift this is, right? Instead of all this efforting of, oh my gosh, everything's not the way it's supposed to be. And I think being able to control that, if you combine something like that perspective and the ability to meditate, which we use a lot of brain tap to do that, photobiomodulation, binaural beats, and if you use a vagal nerve stimulator, now you're getting a trifecta of things to where you can have a massive impact. So I think that's how I would think about it.
It's funny. I was just with Dr. Porter at a conference this past weekend, and he shows up at every one of these conferences, and you got to know the guy doesn't need to do that anymore if he doesn't want to, right? But he's so committed to this mission of his, and the brain tap tool, to me, what's so fascinating about it is it makes accessible something that would take years to develop, a skill that would take years to develop, like meditation. Like, let's face it, in this world that we live in right now, if you don't have that right mindset, which so many people by the time they're 40 or 50, and frankly, with these things and social media and whatnot, it's going to become even more elusive as we go. We need a tool.
We do.
For meditation. We just need it. I just don't think most people are going to be able to get there on their own. Some people will, but not everybody.
Not everybody. Not everybody. I learned how to meditate actually by reading Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and then just having things hit me, and then kind of go into a meditative state. To your point, though, I think meditation becomes a little bit of a black box, because for me, it's like riding a bike. Once you know how to ride a bike, you can you not ride for 5 years. You can jump on a bike and ride a bike. Yeah,
you drop in.
Right, you can drop in. And you get to a point with meditation where you can actually drop in anytime you want. The interesting thing, though, is that, and the point you're making is that it's difficult to get that initial feeling, like, what am I supposed to be doing? Because, I'm trying
Am I doing this right?
Let thoughts go by. I'm doing this. I'm breathing. I'm focused on this. What am I doing, right? And then what is it supposed to feel like? And so the beauty of and there are different devices out there too, but the beauty of something like Brain Tap is that it entrains your brain. It actually pulls your brain into a meditative state. And so the fact that it pulls you in there, then if you actually couple that with, oh, okay, let me just be present. Let me be receiving. Let me go into a receptive mode instead of an efforting mode. Then it's like, oh, I'm feeling this sense of calm. It's like now I'm feeling the glide on the bicycle, right? It's like, and once you feel that glide and then you tip over, it's like, oh, okay, but I felt the glide. Let me go back to the glide. And then you learn how to ride it, right? Now you can ride it over different terrain. And you can get to a point, I will say this about meditation, that the goal is not to meditate in the morning for 10 minutes and meditate at night for 10 minutes. The goal is actually to go through your entire life in a meditative state.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah. But if you go into every situation in a receptive mode, and you put yourself into theta, you can actually go through life in a meditative state. Your life is much more effortless, and there's much more joy in it all the time. And just think of all the stress you're taking off your system. Right?
Yeah. Well, you're going back to that concept of efforting, working through everything, like pushing, as opposed to moving into flow. I mean, that's and the physiological benefits of that would be
massive,
unbelievable. That's so, wow. Okay. So I was going to ask about mitochondria, but it all seems so irrelevant now.
Well, once you organize the internal environment, right? The internal environment, that's our biggest challenge and also our biggest opportunity. We want to focus on the thing outside. The enemy's always outside, but actually, we've seen the enemy as it is us, right? So to speak. Yeah.
Well, I think and this might go into weird territory, but when you look at people who come out of the worst situations on the planet, so someone, let's say, who's been taken hostage, someone who's lived through a horrifying experience, even Holocaust survivors, right? Sure. So people who've been through the worst that humanity has to offer. And quite often those people end up being the most remarkable people. Not everybody. But some of these people find a way in those situations to turn inwards and to find this equanimity, this resilience, or be resourced enough that they're not eternally damaged. I mean, they'll carry scars maybe with them, but they somehow. I mean, I had a neighbor who was a Holocaust survivor, and she was the most resilient person. She was the most positive person.
Yep.
But she was the strongest, most resilient person I had ever met. And Lord knows the universe was not done with her after the Holocaust. She went through all kinds of other crap. And yet this woman she kept on going. And she was kind, and she was intelligent, and she was wise. And she lived to 97. And that's a contradiction in our life, because we tell people stress is going to kill you. And man, the stress that she lived through should have killed her alone. And there's always been this conflict in my mind going, well, if stress kills you, then all these people should be dead. And sometimes they're the longest lived people. Yes,
and yes. I'll give you a little bit of insight around that if you'd like.
Sure, bring it.
There's several things around it. First is that back to our genetics, certain people actually handle stress much better than other people. Some people are much more impacted by stress. So you can have two kids that grow up in the same family, same abusive parents or whatever, physically, psychologically, whatever, and they will come out with completely different experiences. One will be sort of, really on tilt and kind of living in reaction to that in a very powerful way. The other one will have been impacted by it, but not significantly in a way, right? And so there's a genetic predisposition to it to start with. Then to your point, I think there are people that are more introspective and people that are less introspective. And you have a guy like Viktor Frankl, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so talk about Holocaust and man's search for meaning. And, obviously very introspective, reflective in the context of what he was experiencing. But he was that way in every context he was experiencing, not just in the Holocaust, right? Yeah. And so this woman that you're speaking about probably had some good genetic robustness to her, and then also probably had some introspection and some sense of purpose beyond that, right? And that can pull people a long ways. The way that I tend to think about it is that all of us have suffered trauma, right? All of us. And I think almost all of anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, a lot of it is trauma based. And so I want the audience to understand that even though, and maybe some of you did go through the Holocaust, but if you didn't go through the Holocaust, we've all gone through traumatic experiences. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the key things of developing the 3,000-year-old mind is to acknowledge that we've all had traumas and we all live in reaction to those traumas, right? Mm-hmm. Some that we're aware of, like you're a little skittish about doing something because of something previously, but some just put you on tilt and you just have normalized it the way, no, the world is, everybody's like this, when in actual fact, they're not, right? Yeah. So there's the seen and the unseen reactions that we have. And I think one of the real goals in our own personal development is actually to dissect into those traumas and understand them. What actually went down, what happened, who did what was my contribution, what was their contribution? And how was I impacted? And, how were they impacted? Whatever, who were they, right? Because you get to a point, I've been able to get to this point where you can forgive everybody involved, including yourself, right? Mm-hmm. My mom had her own stuff. My dad had his own stuff, right? Everybody's got their own stuff, right? And so you can get to a point where you can forgive everybody involved. And that's the healing process. And then from there, you can actually go to a transcendent process where you actually become grateful for everything that ever happened. And I think the people that went through the Holocaust that actually did the best had the ability to realize that this ultimately was a gift to them. Not because it was terrible and not because it was horrible, but because of what they learned about themselves, their own sense of resilience, their sense of robustness, their sense of being able to care in the worst of circumstances. The insights that they got about what's important and what's not important in life, and so in all of these traumas that we experience, there's a plethora of lessons for us to learn, so to speak. And when we actually are open to learning those, we are become more empathetic, more loving, more caring, and we can bring more joy into the world because of those traumas once we've healed them and transcended them. So then we become grateful for them. And then when you're grateful for them, you're no longer living on tilt. You're no longer living in reaction, right? And now you can show up as your fully expressed self with all of your gifts and say, oh, well, let's go do something really cool and fun and creative, right? So I think that's part of the 3,000-year-old mind journey.
Yeah, I think this is all, it's so interesting. This is a completely different conversation than I had planned for us, which I don't care. I actually think this is way more powerful than talking about, how should people, whatever, you guys are going to get that from a million places.
Right. Yeah.
What kind of fat is healthy and unhealthy? I think that, how much do you think, and I have my own beliefs in this, but you will have seen this clinically in your work with patients. How much does this help like that person who gets to that place, who's resolved the trauma, accepted it, moved past it, like whatever, however, and guys, it doesn't, like Jeffrey just said, like, it doesn't have to be the Holocaust. It could be any experience that yourself took on as a trauma. It could be anything. It could be a teacher who was mean to you, like whatever.
Right. Yep.
How much does this set the stage for, I don't know if transcending is the right word, but I'm going to use transcending anyway, the physical assaults and the chemical assaults that the world throws at us. You know what I mean? Like people, like someone who can smoke and not die of lung cancer versus someone who doesn't smoke and dies of lung cancer. Like there's things in the world we can't explain. Like my video producer, who will howl when I say this, because I've said this he said this to me a long time ago. He talks about his grandmother, she's in her 90s and she drinks and she smokes and she's cantankerous. And he once referred to her, she's like a cockroach, like she's indestructible. Right. And those people defy. Because now you're sitting there across from a patient saying, well, you got to cut back on the booze and you got to quit smoking. And they're like, well, he's drinking and smoking and he's 95.
Right. That's right.
And is it that internal environment, do you think that, part of it is going to be genetic, right? You've got
100%
superhuman detox pathways, you've whatever.
Right. And ones that are super susceptible.
Yeah. But this internal environment, how much, do you think it can really offset so many of these other things that we all worry about, like non-native EMFs and pesticides and not that we wouldn't work towards diminishing the load, But when you get that internal environment set, like, can it be our superpower for longevity?
I think the internal environment is a superpower.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, if there's a lion in the room, we need to take the lion out of the room, right?
Yeah, so exactly.
Both are true.
There's a physical reality.
There's a physical reality, right? So, you know, all the toxins and all the other stuff, right? And yes, there are people that are genetically gifted to where they can smoke. But actually, if they didn't smoke, they probably would have had an even better life, quite honestly.
100%. Right? And better breath.
So that's true, too. Yeah. Which brings up the concept of robustness and resilience. And I know resilience is a term that you have an affinity for. So the way that I think about robustness is it's the ability of something to withstand an unexpected challenge. It's minimally impacted, robust. It's robust, right?
Yeah.
And then resilience is actually the ability to be impacted by an unexpected challenge, but to actually recover from that.
Right.
And that's resilience. And we know that resilience is cut in half in biological systems like ours. About every 8 years, it's cut in half.
Interesting.
Hence the exponential decline, right? This is why older people with COVID died. They didn't have the resilience to come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So resilience becomes incredibly important. One of the best ways that we can actually maintain, build, and grow our resilience is through increasing that sense of equanimity, the parasympathetic nervous system tone, right? Our ability to heal ourselves, our ability to receive the healing from other therapies that we may take in and rebuild. And in our world, we have kind of an anti-fragile position on life, which is, right, being anti-fragile. I think it was Nassim Niar that wrote the book, Anti-Fragile. And his contention was that there is no word that's the opposite of fragile. And we talk about strong, we talk about sturdy, but what he was saying was that, no, something that's anti-fragile, instead of being broken, actually comes back stronger when it meets an unexpected challenge. And so that's what we think about. How do we make ourselves anti-fragile physiologically? And I think, so if I hurt my knee the other year, right? And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to make it stronger than ever. And I have, right? My ankles were weak from twisting them. My ankles are now stronger than ever. How do you make yourself anti-fragile? This is part of identifying with more youthful age, but also this concept of anti-fragility. Well, how do you do that emotionally as well? Mm-hmm. Right? So where you meet the other person that's now bullying you the way somebody else used to or whatever, but you're not impacted by it, right?
Yeah. So
this is, I think, to your point, when we can create this resilience in ourselves, and really it's in the psychospiritual space that it occurs, we have control over it, it does filter into all the physiology, and it makes us much more resilient there as well. That would be my take.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's a great way to put it. I think that, when we talk about chronic stress lowers your immune system, chronic stress will increase, which increases inflammation, which is at we go back to the hallmarks of aging, inflammation, that whole 9 yards. That's where it kind of sets in. So, okay, let's get a little more concrete now for the audience, just before we finish up. So if you had, what are the 3 performance markers in your experience that best predict health span 5 years out? Like, what would you be looking at?
Well, one of the things we're measuring here is measuring parasympathetic nervous system strength. So I think having a really high, parasympathetic nervous system tone and the ability to have equanimity, I think that's one for sure. Another one is VO2 max. So we've been measuring VO2 for over 20 years. I did it back when I was a cardiologist. I started doing it and then carried it on into what we do today. And, the data on VO2 is incredibly strong, probably stronger than any other predictor. And so there's some underlying things, though, with VO2 max that a lot of people don't look at. And that has to do with, as the workload increases on the stress test, what is the left ventricle, the main pumping chamber in the heart, what is its ability to continue to increase the amount of blood that it pumps each beat as that workload goes up? It is a very, very subtle indicator of cardiac dysfunction. And so even though you can have a high VO2, you can have a left ventricular curve that actually tapers off as the workload goes up. And that is a telltale sign that there's a problem. And if you rule out structural things like there's not a valve problem or the sac around the heart, the pericardium's fine, or, you don't have a thick muscle from hypertrophy, you rule out a lot of the, kind of, what should we call it, clinical findings that would cause that to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Then you get down to the blood vessels that are bringing blood to the heart are not working as efficiently as they should to supply blood to the heart so it can continue to beat stronger. Or potentially there's a mitochondrial issue with the heart where it just can't generate the energy, right? So one of the things that we go after is looking at that curve in people, even with high VO2s, to see if we can optimize that for them. Because we can improve it by improving the glycocalyx. We now have a scope we can look under the tongue and actually measure the glycocalyx, which is this sort of fuzz that lines the inside of the artery that's negatively charged and repels bad things, and also senses blood flow and triggers the artery to make nitric oxide to dilate, right? Which is good for brain function, sexual function, cardiovascular function. So when the glycocalyx is healthy, you're healthy. When the glycocalyx is not, you're going downhill. So there are ways to measure that and then improve it with a couple of different supplements out there, Ravasca, Arterosil, things like that. So that's super important to look at also, I think, when you're talking about VO2. I think one of the other things that I see critically important for people is hormone optimization. Hypothyroidism is missed all the time. People come into us and their thyroids are off. They may be on thyroid medication, but they're not anywhere close to being optimized, even though their blood work is normal, right? So it's the fact that people aren't testing biometric testing to actually see where things are set. And they're not looking at the genetics to see what kind of thyroid they need to get it into their brain properly, right? And then the other thing is hormone replacement therapy. You really can't stay youthful without hormone replacement therapy, but you don't want to get cancer either, right? And so when you're, testosterone and prostate cancer can be there, certainly estrogen and breast cancer, actually prostate and breast cancer embryologically come from the same tissue. So they're kind of male expression and female expression of the same embryologic tissue. So you really want to make sure that that people are safe if you're going to do hormone replacement. And the way to do that is, number one, do the genetics. What is their predisposition for cancer, right? And then two, do they have any cancer, right? And so there are tests out there where we're looking for circulating tumor cells to see, because that's a much earlier sign than, what you'd see on a scan. And then beyond that, you've got to know, how are those hormones being metabolized? Are they being safely metabolized and excreted? They're actually detoxed by the body to get rid of them. Or is this person accumulating too much dihydrotestosterone in a male or too much 4-hydroxyestrone in a woman or a man that could lead to one of these cancers? And so you want to make sure it's done safely, but with hormone optimization, bone density, muscle mass, sexual vitality, intellectual capability. There was a large study for women done at Kaiser, 500,000 women, and they looked at women that got any form of hormone replacement therapy, which means they could have gotten testosterone, estrogen alone, progesterone alone. They could have had it for 3 months or 3 years. It could have been just one dose. It was crazy. And they took the people that got any hormone replacement and compared them to those that didn't. And the ones that did, at the end of a decade, had like a 40% reduction in dementia.
Wow.
So for people with histories of Alzheimer's, having estrogen for men and women in their brains is super important. And one of the travesties of male hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, is that they crush the estrogen to try to get the guy more testosterone, which actually is shortening life and robbing their brains and their blood vessels and their bones, quite honestly, of estrogen, which they need for bone density and brain health, right? So hormones are critical, and it's critical that they be done well. But I think they're another super important piece between thyroid and the sex hormones. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the way you explain that, because this, every time I come out with a podcast with an interview with a hormone specialist, you have the raging people who are like, well, I did hormone therapy, I got cancer, or, and it's a very lightning rod subject, and it just, there's just this ultimate lack of nuance. And
That's
the
right.
way that you just, no, we're not going to take you back to your 18-year-old raging hormone self, but
That's
we
right.
are going to get you to a place where your brain can function. And
Absolutely.
this is I talk to so many women who are like, oh, well, I don't have hot flashes, I don't need hormones. I'm like, okay, here's the thing. It's like,
Right.
just because your head's not on fire doesn't mean your bones aren't melting and your brain's not atrophying right now. Never mind the rest of you. So
That's right. Yeah.
it's
Totally.
it's this expectation, right? It's our expectation as we move into our 70s and our 80s and our 90s are very different than the expectations of the people who came before us. Like we expect
Totally. Right. We expect to be good. I'm 27.
good.
Right? So yeah.
Pardon?
I'm 27 and I expect to be 27 for this whole decade, right? Then I'll be 28 the next one. So 29.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good. It's good to be young. It's good to be, it's good to be everything, right? So
I'm 42.
well, good for you. You look great. So,
as do you. All right. So I honestly, truthfully, I say this a lot, but I really mean this. Could really talk for a long time here. And I feel like you probably have other things to do and other traffic jams to get stuck in. So for people who are, let's say, self-directed listeners in outside Dallas who can't come to you, to your practice, what do you think is the most cost-effective starter path to proactive longevity that avoids shiny object traps? And Lord knows there's a lot of those around.
Yeah, there are a lot of them around. I mean, if you want to learn more about us, gladdenlongevity.com. We have a podcast also, the Gladden Longevity Podcast. We've got, 200 and some episodes out there now, I think. Maybe 250. I don't know what it is. We record a couple a week now. And then the book is out there, 100 is the New 30, which is a really
I need to get that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's also on Audible, if people like Audible books. I read the entire thing myself. But it's actually a really good dissertation, quite honestly, on many, many topics related to longevity, all from the perspective from which I'm speaking, right? If that resonates with you, you'll find more of that in the book. Then I think we also have a supplement shop. So we have, in the supplement shop, we have things that are focused on particular categories of things that we find to be typically good. Now, I'm a big fan of custom fit, right? When it comes to longevity. So I would say the other thing to really go after is to work on your mindset. If you're listening to this, right? Don't become a binary thinker. Don't get married to your answers. Identify what questions drive you. I shared the ones that are driving us, right? How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? Live young for a lifetime and have a 300-year-old mind? But you may have your own questions. And it's really important to do that because if you find those questions, it'll actually start to drive your purpose. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think is really work on the psychospiritual space, because we find that is the circle, the ring that binds all the other circles together. Right. Without that, people are self-sabotaging. There's no meaning. There's no purpose. There's toxic relationships. There's no lack of self-love. There's everything goes to heck. Yeah.
So in the context of psychospiritual having been handled, I actually have a question for you. There's, in this world of now emerging gene therapies and peptides and what do you think about those things? Because, some of them are not.
Everything's a gift, right? It's just a question of how you apply it. So, we love peptides. We've been using peptides, and we like bioregulators, and we like, exosomes. We like stem cells. We like PRP. We like ozone. We like, all kinds of things.
All the things, yeah.
All the things, but red light, etc. But what we find is it's really about preparing the individual to receive the therapy. So the mental elements of receiving the therapy, but then also doing plasmapheresis for people to kind of clean out all the trash, right? Mm-hmm. Do the senolytics, do the plasmapheresis, maybe a couple of rounds of that before you start putting in the regenerative products to try to heal whatever you're trying to heal. What we're really trying to do is orchestrate a symphony of healing for the individual. And it's taking out the trash, then putting in the good stuff, then supporting the good stuff with ongoing peptides and supplements, whatever else they need, right? And then you never get away from the psychospiritual space. So we'll put in a plug for Patrick Porter if you want to go check out BrainTap, TAP. That's a very useful tool.
It's a powerful tool. All right, lightning round. Last three questions of the day.
Okay.
One mitochondrial supplement the internet overestimates, and one mundane intervention it underestimates.
For the mitochondria?
Yeah.
Yeah, we like urolithin A lot for mitophagy. We also like NAD. I think, however, NAD has really gone down an odd route.
We don't
It's
even have
really-
time for that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a whole other Pandora's box.
Yeah, we feel like we figured it out, quite honestly, but it's only because we're deconstructing stuff here and figuring it out, and putting it back together. But the point is that, we think that a lot of the NAD stuff out there is not really what you need. You don't really need IV NAD and that kind of stuff. It doesn't even get into your cells. 97% doesn't even get into your cells. So we're big fans, however, of improving the NAD to NADH ratio and of actually giving you the precursors to make it and also to recycle it and to block CD38, an enzyme that as we age accumulates and basically siphons it off, because you do need NAD. It's critical, but you have to do this well too. It's like hormones. It has to be done well. It can't just, I'll get a patch and slap it on and
or the people sub-Qing it every day. I kind of, oh my gosh, you're killing me right now.
Yeah.
All right. A test that almost nobody needs as often as they think, and a test almost nobody is getting enough of. Or soon enough, actually, maybe. Is there something people should be looking at sooner than they think, and a test that people are just grossly overestimating?
Grossly overestimating. I think what gets grossly overestimated is when people go to their doctor or even to a longevity clinic and they get a comprehensive blood panel. I think they are way, way overestimating what that comprehensive actually includes. From our perspective, those comprehensive blood panels are really child's play. They're useful, but they're so inadequate at actually really helping you to understand what's going on. So, and the reason for that is that a lot of them were adopted from a sick care mindset. Right. This is a panel. Now we're going to apply it to you, and if we don't see much, then you're fine. And so that's why these comprehensive tests, I would be very skeptical of people offering comprehensive tests, right? We're going to check 200 markers. Okay, well, that's nothing. We check thousands of markers.
Yeah.
Right. So, right. So I think just be buyer beware of that, what you're getting.
And so what should people be looking at sooner than they are typically, do you think?
Man, it really depends on who the person is, where they are in their life, right? So it's really, it really, what I would do, as I would say, if you're a young person, what would actually be useful would be to actually mark, what are my levels of things now, right?
Your baselines.
Yeah. So I have baselines on my youthful markers, hormones, thyroid, whatever else, resting metabolic rate. I think.
What about a 50-year-old? Like a 50-year-old? Yeah,
a 50-year-old. I think the thing that gets missed the most is what I would call the biometric testing. So we do a lot of biometric testing here. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not a blood test. It's not a stool test. It's not a saliva test. It's not a urine test. You come in and we actually test your body in some way, either by measuring it or having you pedal a bike or sit in a chair and wear a mask or do something. Those biometric tests are full of real world, really personalized information about you. And they are so important, whether you're trying to optimize your parasympathetic nervous system or understand your cognitive abilities or understand how your mitochondria are working through several different lenses. They are so incredibly useful. So the biometric tests like VO2 max testing, resting metabolic rate.
The PNOE, that one?
Yeah, PNOE. We know PNOE. We don't use it. We get everything we need from our VO2 max testing that has pulmonary function tests in it. And then, there are things where you can, we use actually BrainTap makes a computer called a NeuroCheck where you can actually measure the balance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Super helpful. Then personality profiles, right? How are you built? Like we use Culture Index. We see that people are built one way, asking themselves to show up a different way at work and create tremendous stress for them. So we've had people sell companies, hire assistants, do all kinds of stuff based on that. So these are tests that don't require a needle, but can be super, super enlightening. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Last question.
Sure.
The biggest misconception about biological age numbers that you want listeners to stop believing today.
So I think, this is a good one because, everybody has a chronological age, right? Everybody agrees to that.
How many times around the sun have you traveled? Period.
That's it. But for biological age, I think one of the greatest disservices to humanity has been the concept that we have a single biological age. And we actually are a mosaic of many, 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 many biological ages. Every organ system, every hallmark of aging has its own biological age or biological age equivalent, right? And so the way that we think about it is if you really want to know how old you are, you have to look at the entire mosaic and then understand that you're really only as young as your oldest age.
Yeah.
And so when you basically deconstruct it that way, it's like, oh, well, we need to go after the mitochondria. We need to go after inflammation for you. But for you, it's all about telomeres and it's about, something else, right? Senescence in your immune system. So you really, this concept of, oh, I did a biological age test and I came back 5 years younger, 8 years younger, I'm good. That is like the worst lie. That's the worst thing you can possibly perpetrate. That'd be like saying I'm going to bring my F1 car into it for a pit stop and they're going to check the tire pressure on the front right tire and everything's good. We're good. Let's go race, right? It's about that silly. That's how it is. Yeah.
Love it. Dr. Gladden, this has been a fantastic, enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for being here and for your time. Let's just let the audience know where they can learn more. You kind of did a little bit before, but let's close off with connecting them to all your resources and your book and all the beautiful things.
So I'm not, but the company is on Instagram and Facebook and all those places. But the easiest place to get to us is just gladdenlongevity.com. You'll have access to everything through that. If you go to gladdenlongevity.com, that would be the best spot. So, and if you'd like to talk with us about being a client, people fly in from literally all over the place to work with us. We'd be happy to have that conversation too. So
I'm sure they do. Thank you so much again.
Such a pleasure.
And,
really
a pleasure.
To meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.